Sudan is facing what the International Rescue Committee has called the largest humanitarian crisis ever recorded. More than 30.4 million people, over half of the country's population, require humanitarian assistance, according to United States Africa Command. Nearly 12 million people have been displaced, making it one of the gravest displacement crises in recent history, according to the U.S. Department of State. Tactics Institute reports that more than 12.4 million people have been forced from their homes, including over 3.3 million refugees who have fled to neighboring nations. The death toll is both staggering and contested. A U.S. Senate hearing in May 2024 estimated 15,000 to 30,000 deaths, but warned that the true figure is likely 10 to 15 times higher, potentially reaching 150,000, according to the U.S. Department of State. Between December 2024 and May 2025, over 24 million people faced acute food insecurity, with 635,000 living in famine conditions, more than the rest of the world combined, according to United States Africa Command. This humanitarian suffering extends far beyond numbers on paper. In April 2024, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Linda Thomas-Greenfield highlighted evidence of sexual violence against women and girls as young as 14, carried out by RSF fighters, UNODC. UN Human Rights documented at least 3,384 civilian deaths in the first half of 2025, mostly in Darfur. Nearly 80% of all civilian deaths recorded in 2024, PR Nigeria. Origins and trajectory of the war. According to the U.S. Department of State, fighting erupted on the 15th of April 2023, following a power struggle within Sudan's military leadership after the October 2021 coup. The conflict pits. The Sudanese Armed Forces, SAF, led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, against the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, led by General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, Hemedti. The military dynamics have shifted dramatically. The RSF initially seized most of Khartoum and pushed into central Sudan, expelling the army from much of western Sudan and laying siege to El Fasher. By late 2024, SF began regaining ground, and by March 2025 had pushed the RSF out of Khartoum, the conversation. However, in October 2025, the RSF captured El Fasher after an 18-month siege, consolidating control over much of western Sudan, Security Council report. How foreign powers are fueling the war. The war endures largely because major powers continue funneling weapons and money to both sides. Support for the SAF, Russia, and Iran have supplied arms, drones, fuel, and aircraft parts, Africa News. Turkey has sold Bayraktar TB2 drones, while Egyptian officers advise SAF forces, International Crisis Group. Saudi Arabia provides financial and logistical support due to its rivalry with Iran, per Second News. Support for the RSF. The United Arab Emirates is the RSF's primary patron. Multiple reports show the UAE providing weapons, drones, logistics, and even humanitarian aid disguised shipments, in violation of arms embargoes. Euronews, ABC News. Amnesty International has identified advanced Chinese-made weapons, including GB-50A guided bombs and 155mm AH-4 howitzers, believed to have been re-exported to Sudan by the UAE, Atlantic Council. The economics of war gold is a central driver of the conflict. Sudanese gold, much of it smuggled, is exported almost entirely to the UAE, valued at $2.3 billion in 2022, ABC News. Meanwhile, Amnesty International has documented newly manufactured weapons entering Sudan from China, Russia, Turkey, Yemen, the UAE, and Serbia, U.S. Department of State. According to the Washington Post, this non-stop flow of arms continues to inflict immense civilian suffering. Why peace efforts continue to fail. Despite numerous initiatives, peace remains elusive due to 1. Lack of political will. On the 18th of September 2025, General al-Burhan rejected a proposed peace roadmap, insisting that negotiations could not proceed without recognition of his government and arguing that only a military solution was viable. The RSF accepted the plan, but the SAF's refusal created a deadlock. Open doors, US. Both al-Burhan and Hemedti reaffirmed their rejection of negotiations in their March 2025 aid speeches, pledging to continue fighting. Open Doors International. 2. Competing mediation tracks, international and regional actors, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, AU, UN, US, IGAD, have launched overlapping and often conflicting mediation efforts. Deep rifts, particularly between Egypt, pro-SAF, and the UAE, pro-RSF, undermine coherent diplomacy, global Christian relief. Washington has attempted to manage these tensions by limiting direct mediation roles. 3. No enforcement mechanisms agreements reached in Geneva, and Jeddah lacked monitoring and enforcement tools, leading to repeated violations. CNN. Humanitarian corridors and ceasefires were announced but never implemented. Why major powers must intervene. Now 1. The humanitarian crisis is exploding. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk warns of mounting risks of ethnically motivated mass atrocities, especially in El Fasher frontiers. More than 70% of Sudan's hospitals have been destroyed. Disease outbreaks are rising, and millions lack access to medical care. United States Africa Command. 2. Regional stability is at risk. Sudan borders 7 countries already grappling with conflict, economic collapse, and refugee pressures. Continued fighting risks destabilizing the entire Horn of Africa and undermining regional food security. 3. The cycle of violence will not end without pressure. Whenever one side gains the upper hand, foreign backers rearm the other, prolonging the war. The conversation. Both SAF and RSF leaders believe continued fighting serves their interests. United States Africa Command. 4. Accountability requires international action. On 11th July 2025, the International Criminal Court informed the UN Security Council that war crimes and crimes against humanity are being committed in Darfur, U.S. Department of State, PR Nigeria. Without external pressure, perpetrators will not face justice. 5. The world is not paying attention. Volker Turk has warned that Sudan's conflict is becoming a forgotten crisis, even as the scale of suffering reaches catastrophic levels. PR Nigeria. What major powers must do. 1. Stop the flow of weapons. The international community must enforce and expand UN arms embargoes, impose sanctions on countries and companies supplying weapons to both SAF and RSF, target gold smuggling networks financing the conflict, hold Russia, Iran, Turkey, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE accountable. NPR, The Washington Post. 2. Establish a unified mediation framework. According to EEW magazine, a unified, coherent international process is essential. This framework must consolidate competing mediation tracks under UN leadership, define clear roles for the AU and Arab League, include enforcement and accountability mechanisms, bring in Sudanese civil society and pro-democracy groups. 3. Coordinate global pressure. Major powers must apply synchronized economic, political, and diplomatic pressure. Joint US, EU, UK sanctions. Asset freezes for individuals and entities, fueling the war. Diplomatic pressure on Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iran. Penalties for states that continue providing weapons. 4. Ensure humanitarian access. Immediate steps include creating internationally monitored humanitarian corridors, funding the severely underfunded response plan, considering peacekeeping or civilian protection deployments, establishing safe zones for displaced populations. 5. Advance accountability and justice. Key measures: supporting ICC investigations, documenting war crimes and sexual violence, establishing a truth and reconciliation process, using Magnitsky-style sanctions against perpetrators. NPR. 6. Address the political roots of the conflict. Long-term peace requires a credible transition to civilian rule, reforming Sudan's militarized economy, dismantling parallel armed networks, supporting Sudan's pro-democracy resistance committees and civil society. The stakes are global. Unless the world halts foreign interference, Sudan risks descending into a disaster that will destabilize the entire region for decades. ABC News. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres calls Sudan's war a catastrophe of staggering scale and insists the only solution is an immediate end to hostilities. Tactics Institute. The international community bears responsibility, not only because major powers are fueling the conflict, but because global inaction enables the slaughter to continue. Major powers have the leverage to help end the war. The question is whether they will act before Sudan collapses entirely. The era of half measures is over. Sudan needs decisive, coordinated international action to stop the weapons, pressure all actors, protect civilians, and chart a path toward civilian governance. Anything less condemns millions to further suffering and death.